Good morning, everyone. When I came into the church first thing this morning, they were playing the song, "Send the Fire." And I almost immediately broke into tears almost. I thought to myself, I hope this isn't being sung just before my talk, or I won't be able to get through it. I settled back down, and then Lonnie led us through, "I have called you by your name," and this wasn't any better. Just sitting there, I've actually changed the opening in my thoughts. The thoughts I put together, I called "to join or to separate." And it's like listening to the music, and I think it's why we're all here, is this sense of longing to join with one another. And in some ways, joining is so heartfelt, and separating is so sorrowful. It's painful. I find it painful. So that's almost getting to the end of my talk, so I'm going to go back to my beginning now and share with you that there's a question that I have struggled with all my life. And that question is, am I going to listen to the voice for God, or am I going to listen to the voice for my ego? So much of my life, I didn't know I even had a choice. I was lost in my ego's prison of guilt and separation. I was completely unaware that beneath those feelings and beliefs I had about myself, there was innocence and love that I was totally unaware of, but was longing for. I firmly believe that we can heal our imagined separation from God, and that we can do it by opening our hearts and joining with one another. One of the ways that helps me to overcome my ego's inclination to separate itself is to imagine that all of us here have come together with one common purpose. And this purpose is, as I see it, to board a cruise ship whose destination is the heart of God. A cruise ship that is powered by the grace that's released when we're willing to join with one another. What I would like to do is to share with you some of my misguided choices, along with a few realizations. And I do that in the hope that you will stumble less often. That was timely, wasn't it? Less often than I have. I stumbled right out of the gate as soon as I was born. I got an early start, or my ego did in any case. I was so looking forward to that first taste of breast milk. You can imagine my dismay when I discovered it had been taken off the menu and replaced with cow's milk. I wasn't pleased. This wasn't part of my plan for happiness. I thought to myself, I turned to my ego. Now, my ego was nonverbal, of course, but my ego was well established in its ability to scheme and manipulate. And it suggested a starvation strike to get my needs met. I was to implement this strategy for 6 months. At the end of that time, my weight was 1/2 of the weight my normal weight should have been. So much for getting happiness from turning to my ego. At the age of, there were 3 things I could learn from this experience. The first was that if in an attempt to free myself from suffering, I turn to my ego, it's inevitable that suffering will increase. Secondly, choosing to be a victim is disempowering. The way forward is to be accountable and to realize The only thing that I'm a victim of are the stories that I have going on in my mind. And thirdly, on reflection, I could see that I was in an authority conflict with my parents over getting my needs met. But what I realized was there was something much deeper going on. And what it was that I was in a battle with God over who was going to be at the helm of this ship. At the age of 9, I had another misstep. Let me see where I'm at. Oh, yeah. Page 9. Oh, there we go. All these papers, my goodness. At the age of 9, my parents enrolled me in Sunday school. My recollection is that I enjoyed Sunday school, but I think what I liked best was praying to God and hoping that He would solve all the problems. However, a fateful day came along in Sunday school. The Sunday school teacher made a mistake. She did what to my mind was unthinkable. What did she do? She assigned Sunday school homework. No, this didn't fit with my plan. I wanted to have fun and play. I went home. I de-enrolled myself from Sunday school. And to show my displeasure with God, for good measure, I de-enrolled myself from church as well. At the age 10, I was looking around for a doorstop for my bedroom door. I thought about it for a bit, and I figured I needed something that was heavy, was never used for anything else. A book seemed like a logical thing to me. I got it. It was working like a charm. Well, like a charm until my dad came along, and he said, "Son, I don't think this is the best use for the family Bible." Now, clearly, I was having issues with God. At the age of 12, I had an experience that had the possibility of turning my life in the direction of spirituality. But it scared me so badly, I went running off in the very opposite direction. What happened was, I was walking home from school one day. It was a sunny day, clear blue sky, it was warm. I paused and I looked up. My mind stopped. I had an epiphany. I realized I wasn't what I thought I was. I was boundless. I was innocent. I was timeless. There was no sense of a separation to be found anywhere. This scared me. I thought to myself, I better start filling this place up with things to identify with, like a name, a body, family, relationships, problems, even the kitchen sink if I could have, anything to avoid dissolving into this space, this boundless space of pure awareness. At the age of 17, I was experiencing a lot of emotional pain, the pain of separation. One day, I said to myself, enough is enough. I'm going to do something about this. I wonder if you can guess what I chose to do. Not knowing any better, I turned to my ego. And it loved to be in charge and sustain itself, so it was happy to offer me a strategy. This strategy was to become an island unto myself. I was to spend a good part of my life carrying out this strategy. What I found was that the pain came with me and got worse. Of course it did. It was coming from me to begin with. At the age of 18, I was aware of the emotional pain in the family and in families in the world. And I asked myself a question. I said to myself, would I be willing to sacrifice myself if it would save the world from all its suffering? It turned out that the answer was no. I got conveniently very busy trying to keep myself afloat in the sea of separation of this world. I forgot all about the question. 10 years later, at the age of 28, was a major turning point in my life. I had this great passion and love for playing tennis. I was a provincially ranked player. My plan for happiness was to play tennis until I was 85, where I would drop dead of a heart attack on a tennis court. It turned out the universe had a different plan. And what particularly annoyed me about this situation was it didn't check with me first. Now, I was only later able to understand why it didn't check with me first, because it knew darn well that if I knew ahead of time, I would have put in for a transfer to a different program. What happened was that all sorts of things started to go wrong with my body, so much so that I was never to play tennis again. I was never to play sports with my son or daughters the way I anticipated. I was shattered. This was intolerable. I was enraged. I blamed God. I thought to myself, if he's going to take away my toys for happiness, I'm going to destroy his. And what I did was, in fantasy, I fantasized taking a baseball bat and destroying whole universes. I did kind of laugh to myself in a way and think to myself, maybe it was just as well I couldn't swing this baseball bat in that manner, because the karma might have been pretty heavy going. Despite my desperate and exhaustive efforts to find a way out of my predicament, I wasn't to find one. This did lead me, though, to turn in the direction of psychology and spirituality. And one day, as this part of the journey, I decided to look inwards. In the absence of beliefs or thoughts about myself, to look inwards and see what my experience of myself really was. And I had a second epiphany. It was similar, and it brought back that memory of when I was 12, of being boundless and innocent, with having no sense of separation whatsoever. And I thought to myself, if I am boundless, every single other person must be boundless too, and they just don't know it. They just don't recognize it. A year later, I came across a line that jumped out at me, and it said this: to free the world from every kind of pain is but to change your mind about yourself. From these boundless experiences, I understood that line completely. I also understood that the sacrifice I thought of when I was 18 and had that experience, I thought it was the sacrifice involved. It involves no sacrifice whatsoever. Although admittedly to the ego, as we let go of it, it will feel or may feel like sacrifice. What I realized was that the world and its sense of separation was arising from my very own mind. And if I was going to play my part is the word I wanted to say, in healing of the world, what I was going to have to do was to turn to the Holy Spirit and ask for its help in healing my mind of the sense of separation that I believed in and I was projecting out onto the world. Over the last couple of decades, I've noticed that my perspective has ever so slowly begun to shift. And I say slowly because my ego has resisted all along the way. I'd like to give you just 2 illustrations of this. The first is I realize that my ego, when it wants to escape from something, be a denial about something, it doesn't want to look at something, what it does is it projects it onto somebody else and says, the problem is over there in them. They are the guilty ones. God, you punish them. I'm just little innocent me. But the very fact that I'm projecting it out there shows me that in my unconscious, I do believe that I'm the guilty one and I'm fearful of punishment. Projection is not an escape. It's an imprisonment. Because in fact, what we see outside of ourselves and judge is what we're reinforcing inside of ourselves. So it doesn't work. A second example. In so much of my life, I have turned away from things that make me feel uncomfortable. Emotions, feeling, people, events, it's endless. I realize the way through is to turn towards them, to embrace them, to give up the resistance. Then it begins to dissolve and loses its hold over me. So one of the things I do when something comes along that's triggering me is I remind myself, I say to myself, the world is a classroom, and each event is a lesson. And each lesson is an opportunity to make a better choice, to choose once again. To choose, for example, to see the event through the Holy Spirit's eyes of innocence versus seeing it through the ego's projection of guilt. One thing that has helped to reinforce this for me is something that Eckhart Tolle said. He said, that which appears to be your greatest obstacle in life is in fact your greatest doorway. The greatest blessing in your life is that which you consider to be the greatest curse. True love comes from total acceptance of what is. And now, finally, back on board this cruise ship CMUC. It took considerable cajoling by a friend of mine to get me to even come and attend a service. I did. I loved the experience. I kept coming back. Then one day, I noticed in the bulletin they were looking for an office administrator. I applied for the job. I got it and had it for 7 years. And there would be times then when I would think to myself, how did this happen? I, who never went to church in my life, and I'm worshiping in a church, I'm working in a church, I'm getting highly emotional in the services and the music that's played. Here's what I did think was, I thought the universe got to have the last laugh. I thought, it's true. I'm much better off listening for the voice for God, than I am in listening for the voice for my ego. This congregation has warmed my heart, and I'm firmly convinced that it is our willingness to join with one another that creates the energy that will propel this cruise ship to its final destination, where we all come to recognize our oneness with one another and with God. May it be so.